Hello, everyone. I had texted Michael to say Happy New Year and I'll be here. And then he says, "Oh, you should go to Stockholm." And then it was go to Malmo and then go to Copenhagen and all sorts of places. But he has a way of twisting my arm to do a talk. But it's always nice to come back to Malmo and to spend time here at Food Cafe. I've had some of the nicest conversations here. And some of you have heard me talk here in Sweden before. Uh, know that sometimes I talk about things in the extreme, um, and it creates context for what is so-called normal in Sweden, and this is no exception. I'm not sure whether this might be controversial or not that I'm going to talk about, but let's let's start here. I'm Aslam. I come from this shithole country uh, on the African continent. I've brought two other people who are friends of mine. Hands up. That's Chris on the top. That's Inyari at the bottom. Um, so yeah, our friend Mr. Trump claims that everyone from Africa comes from a shithole country, and he also said the Norwegians are welcome to America. So I mean that's quite a statement, eh? And we can laugh about it, but is there something about it that bothers you? Are you hiding something behind your laughter? That's a question you have to ask yourself. Is there something about what he said that makes you uncomfortable and we deal with the discomfort by laughing about it? Or is it just humor? Okay. And then in the global expansion, when Sweden has been trying to take over the world for centuries, we know that, right? Um, and one of the weapons of global domination is H&M. And they flighted this ad 2 weeks ago for with this young black kid with the coolest monkey in town, in the jungle. And this resulted in a whole bunch of people storming the shops, H&M stores in the malls, and you are racist. And it's not the first time that H&M has made such a boo-boo in South Africa. But the mother of the child then responded, we don't know how much is authentic or whether this was part of PR campaign. She said, "Stop crying wolf all the time. It's unnecessary issue here. Just get over it." So now the question I have to ask yourself, is that how we, I mean, there's something here that makes us feel uncomfortable again. And should that be our reaction? Just get over it. And so it is extreme cases. And you have to ask yourself, what made you uncomfortable in this case? The fact that it may be, I mean, it might be different for different people. That it's a Swedish company in a different country and it makes the country look bad. Or you might be thinking, but which idiot signed off on this advertising campaign? Like, it went through stages. Someone looked at the copy, someone came up with this and says, yeah, I think that's fine. Let's sign it off. Um, so there's something here that makes you feel uncomfortable. And at the end of the day, we often deal with this kind of discomfort and we can laugh about it. And stand-up comedians do the same thing. They help us laugh at ourselves because sometimes the change that is necessary, the discomfort that we feel is just too heavy. And the topics are too heavy. And yet we deal with that in the places that we work. And so in the last few years, I've been part of, together with my friends, dealing with parallel issues or similar issues in some ways. And I want to talk about that today. And I don't want to talk for too long. And I'd like to have conversation more than anything else. And in the abstract, I said, I think it's important that we are able to find ways to talk about difficult subjects in a meaningful way, as opposed to speaking to the person. We should speak to the issue. and maybe we'd find better ways. So I don't necessarily have solutions, but I want to share certain context in which I've been involved in for the last few years. Um, so let's deal with this. So about 5 years ago, I was consulting on my own. I had structured my life so I had quite a bit of time to myself, and we might call it work-life balance. And it was very comfortable. I was very deliberate about the kind of consulting work I was doing. I chose the work I was doing, and I discarded work which I thought was completely either boring or too complicated from a social aspect, and I went for really technical problems that were really hard to solve, and I wanted to enjoy myself doing that, and I deliberately picked people that I wanted to collaborate with, and it was very enjoyable. It was also very predictable. It was very comfortable. And you guys do agile stuff, eh? And he said, no, why are you doing agile? Never about velocity, it's about predictability. So essentially, we're all yearning to be completely boring. And so this was boring, but also at the same time, it created a set of blinkers. And you kind of lose focus about what is the reality in which you find yourself. And so I did get involved a little bit, and Inyari teases me. She says I had the longest interview ever to join the company we were working at. It was literally about 18 months. I was interviewing the company, okay? I was interviewing the company. I literally used to pitch up in Johannesburg and hang out at the offices and talk to people and all sorts of things. And it's like, so when are you going to sign up? Why should I sign up? Like, why? I'm comfortable. My life is fine. I know. But it took 18 months before I committed to doing work with them for 1 week a month. 1 week. And then it changed, and then after a little while it became 2 weeks. And it got to a point where then I was asked to join full time. Okay, and it wasn't an easy decision. And there's a part of it that motivated me to get involved. What they were attempting to do was a big deal, and I knew I had to involve myself in it. I've spoken about such things before. I was aware of it, and I had lived a comfortable, sheltered life for 5 years or so, and it's time to stop, pick your head off the ground, and stare things in the face. This was the reality check, is that I work and live in a historically oppressive society, coming from South Africa, or anywhere on the continent of Africa, actually. And the reality is that nothing has changed. There's extreme polarization based on gender and race. We often hear in the software community, and it's been emphasized correctly in the last few years, about the gender imbalance in the software community. We see it over and over. We're hearing more and more people speak openly about it. Abuse, etc., is a real issue. And so this polarization exists. Hasn't gone away. Existed then. I just chose to walk and look in a certain way. That was it. But here was an opportunity to address it and work with a group of people that shared that agenda, and it reignited a certain purpose in me, and I said, let me do this. So it was necessary. It was, in a South African context, the software development fraternity, the community, is a white male-dominated society. It's a country with 80% black people, but 80% white male developers. That's the reality. And so to see black software developers of any gender in a workplace is a rarity. And so the agenda here was, let's turn this thing to represent the demographics of the society in which we work. Not that we had, KPIs for the first year and the second year and third year, but we knew this was going to be a multi-decade, but we have to start somewhere, we have to try something in a concerted effort. So that was what I was part of. I wanted to be part of that. On the surface, the organization itself had some stuff which I was quite comfortable with, of how to turn something like this around. Low revenue, high expenses, questionable software delivery quality, and like you have here, it's difficult to find and attract and retain the top talent. So this is not unusual for many companies. I've dealt with this before. I felt comfortable dealing with this. And so it was, okay, we can do this. This we can do. There's nothing extreme about this. You can go through a method of actually dealing with them one at a time or in parallel. I was completely unprepared for what was below the surface. And so below the surface, which hit me very quickly, racism. So racism is discrimination based on race. White, black. In South Africa we have colored, which is people of interrace marriage. Cronyism, that is you appoint your friends to positions of authority and it's not based on qualifications. So it's like, I like Marcus, come, right? That's not a formal offer, Marcus. Just letting you know. I don't know if you know about xenophobia. Xenophobia, prejudice against people of another country. People who are either working in your country because they need to work there, or they are asked to work there, or they are genuinely an immigrant to the country. And if you look at South Africa's history, incredible amount of violence and rioting, etc., based on that. And of course, something that's pervasive everywhere in the world is the sexism, prejudice predominantly against women. Dealing with those in a very real way, in a very obvious way, if you just like adjusted your Google Lens glasses the right way. And suddenly I'm dealing with this. And it's a tough gig. And it's extreme. And now you have to figure out how to do this. I looked at this, it became clear that this is what I'm dealing with. And so the question is, where do you start? It's a complex problem, it's probably a wicked problem. It's a fractal of society. But how do I make this organization work in order to achieve the agenda that we had all set out to achieve? I don't know who to trust. I don't know who trusted me. There was a lot of dissent. A lot of people were leaving. Because they were leaving your consulting company, your revenue drops. There was outwardly malicious behavior towards me and others. Suddenly factions start forming. And you know what we call that, hey? When you do it here as well? It's just politics, eh? It's politics. It's company politics. We don't deal with that. It's company politics and we ignore it, and it's like, yeah. And so it'll be someone else's problem. And the reality is that it's actually everyone's problem. And mostly mine, because I had to deal with it. And I've spent a lot of time and trying to understand how to change organizations. I even got paid to change organizations. And you read things like Agile Manifesto and Patterns for Change, and it's all it's a very soft approach to change, everything that we read. It's very collaborative. It's like the number one thing is that we work together to bring about change. And we'll do some certain practices and then we'll all go kumbaya and walk down the path, and it'll be great, and it's portrayed as a happy, fluffy journey. And here, my starting point is that I don't know who to trust. I don't know who trusts me. People are trying to basically kill each other. They're doing malicious things to each other. And yeah, I think we should be collaborative. I think I'll get a few post-it notes, put them up, Let's do a safety check. 1 is uncomfortable. 5 is I'm really comfortable here. I'll share everything about my life. Let's do a safety check. It's like, that rubbish, stop it. It's not going to happen, right? And suddenly you realize that it's an extreme context. It's really crazy. And whenever you use the word extreme and you start looking for solutions, you end up with words like radical, revolutionary, dictatorship, as ways to control the situation. And those words by themselves are, if you look at mainstream media, if you say those things, it's like, what? I won't say it here because I'll get interrogated at the airport leaving. I know Michael will have this thing up on the website, and I said the word that starts with T and ends in T with a few R's in between and stuff. Like, that's what people associate with those words. By the way, I was interrogated at Helia station, coming on the train yesterday. I have witnesses. The 3 of us were sitting. We came in from Copenhagen, and border control comes. They ask for my passport. I give them a passport. They flip through it. There's lots of visas in there. They find the one. I said, it's the one with the long hair. You find that one. It's like, it's a multiple entry, 1-year visa for Schengen countries. Why are you here? Business. When are you leaving? Saturday. Can I see your plane ticket? Like, I don't have one. It's an e-ticket. Yes, can we see it? It's like, I'll look on my phone. I'm sorry, I don't have Wi-Fi. Do you have Wi-Fi on this train? Oh, don't worry about it. And they walk away. It's like, what is this? You know? And Yari's sitting there. It's like, don't you try that with me, all right? Like, you don't go there. So, like, anyway. But I realized that if I'm going to change the status quo and shift it, it's going to do with something like that. It's going to involve something like that. As much as we like to talk about patterns for change and how comfortable it is and how we do this in a very collaborative, co-optional way, this is change that has to be forced. That became very clear to me. And it scared the hell out of me to have to do that. So, where do I start was the question, right? I asked you, where do I begin? No one trusts me, I don't know who to trust, etc. In the absence of all sensible things that you read in a book, like get food and people will sit and eat, and etc. I mean, I don't know whether people are going to poison me, right? So I reached for this ideology. What is the ideology that I'm after? And who else subscribes to that ideology? And find the few people who subscribes to that ideology. Because that is what's going to bind you together. Whatever that ideology may be. But find the one that makes you work together. And it's generally in the minority. There's another minority. This is basically a bell curve, right? One side you have a minority who subscribe to your ideology. On the other side, you have a minority that are the complete opposite of your ideology. The interesting thing is that the ones that subscribe to your ideology are incredibly quiet. You don't ever hear about them. You struggle to find them. You go to the other side with the absolute, they're the noisiest bunch around. They make the most noise. They create chaos. They'll say everything all the time. And it's completely against what you want. But they create this fracas, this incredible noise. And then the majority in the middle are actually sitting there doing this. Those guys are really nice. Those guys are really quiet. I'm just going to go and do my pull request. Yeah, okay. But basically, the majority of people are looking for direction. They're looking for leadership. They either want to go where it's noisy, or like, it's quiet there, but I don't know what's really going on there. So they're looking for a way, and they're looking for someone, and they're looking for a purpose to help them make a decision on which way to go. The nice thing about thinking of it in this way is that you have the wonderful opportunity to ignore the noise. The normal strategy is to go where the noise is and tell them to keep quiet. But you can just absolutely ignore them. It takes an incredible amount of discipline to say, ignore that. You know these people are similar to you. They may be quiet. And together you just focus on talking to the people in the middle, helping them understand the situation, and it's hard conversations about the reality check that I mentioned. Like, do you understand that genuinely is this racism going on? There is the xenophobic stuff. Look, let me tell you what happened in this situation. It is that. It's like, really? I didn't even know it was happening. It's that kind of stuff. Focus on the noise. You're ignoring the majority and your allies. The people can help you actually bring change. I made the mistake. I didn't follow this advice last week. My neighbors across the road have this horrible habit. The children, they like teenagers, they park their car on the street and they rev it like, and it's a stupid old Honda. It's like, but and like I got fed up. 11 o'clock in my boxer shorts and a t-shirt, I walk outside. You better stop this right now. I'm sick and tired. I'm going to lay a charge against you. The noisy people. I'm dealing with the noisy people. The mother jumps out of the car and she looks at me and says, stop shouting at the children. They're not children. They're teenagers making a noise. I can't watch TV. It's like, go and cut your hair. That's what she told me. Go cut your hair. I'm like, okay. Back to my house. Close the door. Like, I realized that. Okay, I'm fighting. I'm shouting at the noisy people. Like, just, go and find a whole bunch of people on the street who don't know what to do with this problem, and we all go and stand there and say, you know what, you're making a noise. Just stop it. All right. Anyway, you are dealing with this. You are spending an incredible amount of time working with people that are ignorant of actually what is happening, dealing with a faction that is designing their behavior to dismantle all that is being done, and an incredibly small group that is trying to make that ideology a living thing. And from a leadership point of view, you get isolated very quickly, and the loneliness sets in. It's like there's days where you're dealing with the situation, you cannot believe that was the behavior of someone actually deliberately did this to that person. The cases like, look at payroll and and it's obvious this person is being underpaid by a significant amount compared to the other person. Like, how the hell did this happen, right? And you have to address it, and it gets lonely, and you have to find a way to deal with that loneliness, and in the thing that you're trying to do. So this is the one thing that I've learned. When you in any kind of leadership, the buck stops with you. It genuinely stops there. You've got to make that decision. And we often talk about leadership in a very positive way, and it is a positive thing most of the time. But I struggle to find material and conversations where I'm involved in, at the very least, where people will tell you, you know what, boy, you're on your own. When the chips are down, you're on your own. You're making that decision, and you actually have to live with the consequences of that decision. And that is hard. To name the decision that you made and to live with the consequences thereof. That is leadership. And it leaves you in a very isolated position. More so, it demands of you to be incredibly vulnerable, because you are putting yourself out there. You are going to take this feedback, whether you like it or not. It's coming to you. And it's not through consensus. When you can't co-opt and you can't collaborate, you are making a decision that you fundamentally believe is the right thing to do, and you step in there and you do it. And you're on your own. And that's the hard part. Incredibly hard. And this went on for about 3 years. At the end of it, those things above the surface turned around, it got better. Company grew, it shrunk, ended up with the right combination of people. There was general happiness and content amongst everyone. And at the end of it, Ended up with a team with 80% black consultants, an operational team of which I was the only man. I was the only guy. Got to work with Nyari as a co-director of the company and leader of it. And she was my covert ops on the ground. You know, the guerrilla warfare. Nyari was handling that for me. So I want to tell you about 9 things that I learned from that. I mean, I could tell you a lot of stories, but Nyari will have to have me killed. Uh, but I distilled it down to 9 things. I'm going to go through them and let's see if any resonate. And maybe some of that you'll be able to take back. But these are 9 things I think we should be talking about. And I don't think we talk about it often enough. We say politically correct stuff with nice euphemisms. One thing I've learned, never compromise your ideology. Never. You may doubt yourself, but don't compromise it. When you're suffering with doubt, I don't know, find a book and read about your ideology, but don't read Nietzsche. Right? It's like you'll stare into the abyss. It's just don't do that. Read everything else but that. But never compromise that. The moment you give up on that, it's game over. It means you're actually corruptible. You can be swayed. And then your agenda is drifting to another direction. It's okay to move along on a path and be this so-called adaptable, agile person or organization. You shift this way, you shift that way, reacting to external stimuli, but you keep your ideology front and center. Don't give it up. And that was a hard lesson, is that if this was given up, I would have had very little to hang a hat on. Right, that was the first one. Huh? Come on. Let's do this. Okay, this is a bit of a cryptic one. Interim states are dangerous. You know, we're all geeks and software engineers and blah blah blah, and we talk about, let's take a state machine. There's no intermediate state, right? I go from state A to state B. It's a very clean transition, right? It's a step change. That's it. It's done. There's nothing in between. Yet, it's easy to fall into this trap that when you're trying to change an organization and change a team, it's like, okay, for the time being, we'll work like this, and then Nyari and Esther will work here, and then when we get to that point, then we'll go to the... It's easy to fall into this trap of that intermediate transitionary phase dragging out for an incredibly long time, and that becomes the norm, and you never get to the state that you want. There's many things that I did here where I actually look back and say it should have been done faster and more decisively, and I should have designed it as not having an interim state. And so the act of a step change is revolutionary. It's a quick transition, and the quicker the transition, the quicker you can deal with the anxieties, etc., of that new state. And so avoid that. It's dangerous. Focus on the output. We often do a lot of planning based on input. These are the things that need to go in. How many people? How many hours? Like, no. Just focus on the output. We're after this. And then figure out the inputs to get you there. It's such a simple shift in thinking. I'm after this outcome. That is my intention. Now what is it going to take to get there? Whereas we often do this very scientific management approach, and try to figure out how to do that. Basically, I'm saying relative estimation is rubbish, right? But I'm serious. This is something I've learned also the hard way. This statement I got from a client, a CIO of a client, and we're having coffee, Nyari and I, and we're just having just a general catch up, and he just said this: yeah, your culture will eat your strategy for breakfast. And it's absolutely true. It was the nicest way he could explain what we were attempting. That we could come up with every possible strategy in grand words, and the culture that you grow will render that entire strategy completely worthless. And so we learned to focus on the culture and the output that we're after, and the strategy and the inputs will start taking care of themselves. Plan to be fast. That is, you want to do things quickly, act quicker than what you planned, and be decisive. I received feedback in this time that I jumped to conclusions too quickly. But I was doing this. It was very clear to me, very obvious to me, that this was the decision tree that we went through, that needed to happen. And this is the outcome that we're after. When you linger and you delay working in this way, this trips you up. You fall into, it's kind of related to the whole intermediate states thing. You fall into that trap. So be decisive, act fast, act faster than that. You're going through a massive transition. So there's people leaving and there's people joining. It's horrible to see people leave an organization. Unfortunately, some will be asked to leave. It's the harsh reality of a forced change. This is what helps me sleep at night. If someone enters the organization, they enter at a particular level, when they leave, for whatever reason, just make sure they leave better than when they arrived. That's all. That is all. Then you know you've been doing something right as an organization. They should leave better than when they joined. Not worse, not the same. It has to be better. Never drop the height of the bar that you set. You have a certain standard. It's up there. It might be not even a standard that you yourself can reach, but it is an aspiration. And there will be a gap. But don't lower it. When you lower it, you start compromising so many things. And you hit that ceiling and you think you're all great. And then there's a whole bunch more that you actually need to do. Set the bar high. Don't lower it. Keep it there. And remind people that's what we're after. This is what we're trying to get to. Question your own ability to even reach that. It's a tough thing to swallow. That I might not reach that either. But when you set that bar that high, and you do have critical conversations with each other and giving feedback in a meaningful way, then you'll realize that, oh, perhaps I could try this out. Chris reminded me that in that situation I behaved in that way. If I change that behavior, I could stand on my toes and get a little bit closer. So don't drop that. This one is a big deal. Don't lie when you can't tell the truth. Sometimes, for many reasons, you cannot share the truth with someone because it's either too dangerous, you're bound by confidentiality, something like that. Don't talk lies. Don't fabricate a story. Rather say, Adam, I can't share with you right now what's going on. Perhaps in 2 weeks' time, I'll be in a better position. But I know you want to know. I want to tell you, but sorry, it's not going to happen. And you start gaining a bit more respect. As was going to Adam and says, yeah, but you know what happened? This is what really happened. And maybe we'll end up there. And it's like, that's the worst thing you can do. So it's easy, in an informal setting. Hey, so Aslam, what happened here? It's like, can't tell you, sorry. And yes, there will be rumors that will spin up. Just let it, those are the noisy people. This one is what I've learned recently, is always name the truth. Right at the beginning, when I put up the picture of Trump and the H&M ad, what's making you uncomfortable? Name it. Like I was saying there, it's hard. Call it. It's cronyism. It's racism. It's sexism. Name it. Name it and put it in the middle so you can actually talk about it. If you can't name it and you just call it it's company politics, you won't make inroads into the problem. And as software developers, we know naming is hard. We might name it wrong. So Name it. I learned this from Yari. Also name your feeling. And I'd be down, I'd be feeling lonely, I'd be like struggling with things like, what are you feeling? And it's like, oh, yeah, I think I'm sad. No, I don't think you're sad. Ah, I'm just exasperated. Try again. Like you go, can I phone a friend? So name it. Name the truth, name your feelings, name everything. And question your name. Right? So that's 9 things of how to deal with things which in my case was an extreme context, but I think it's actually relevant in more context than what I painted. I do think so. I really do think so. And it is 9 things, and as a developer, it's off by 1 error. So there's a 10th one, which I'm not going to talk about, and I'm asking Nyari to talk about because she taught me this.
Okay, so apparently Michael twisted Aslam's arm. He used his free arm to twist mine. So next time, please twist both arms, and I'll be safe. And I think he should have named the slide Khan Sanity, because of his top 4, he had racism, sexism, xenophobia. And so when Aslam had this interesting job to do, he picked a black woman from Zimbabwe while we were in South Africa. So that's Khan Sanity. But essentially, hold the line, be as humane as possible, and cry in solitude. And where this comes from is when you're making tough choices and you're being a revolutionary and you're holding high bars and essentially forcing change, and then the onslaught of attack comes on you. Part of sticking to the ideology is reminding yourself to be human. You can't retaliate, you can't act in anger, you act for the mission and for the purpose, and it's painful. And because it's painful and lonely and sad, sometimes you cry. But you can't, and why you cry in solitude is you can't fire someone and be the one crying and require them to console you and be like, oh my God, I'm so sorry, but I really have to fire you because you're doing a terrible job. You have to hold that line and say, I'm doing this for the right reasons. You won't like it. Someone else who's watching will infer what they will infer, and they won't like it. I can't tell the whole story. In some cases, for your own good, and you get to paint a story you want to paint, but I must hold a line. And so with this, it's about, with every decision, remembering to check your own humanity. Am I doing it for the right reasons? Am I doing it because you called me the angry black woman? Or am I doing it because you're not doing a good job? Am I doing it because you were in that clique and that clique said things about me? Or am I doing it because the team needs this? Am I just frustrated by the fracas you cause? Or is it detrimental to what we're trying to achieve? And so that's the humanity, the constantly questioning yourself, hard as it is, equipped as you are to build a case of self-defense. You always have to act with intent and for the right reasons. And then remember to be human and vulnerable in making these really tough decisions day in and day out, and facing this attack day in and day out, and being called names because you're a girl, and being called names because you're black, and being called names because you're a foreigner. And just be like, yeah, you did that and that wasn't nice. But this is actually the job we're trying to do, and this is where we're trying to go. And I can answer for my decisions against that criteria and that criteria only. And it hurts my feelings. I'm not going to pretend like I don't care what anyone thinks. I actually do. I don't care what anyone says. I actually do. It does hurt me. It does upset me. But that's not what's important here. And then remember to take your feelings to another place and deal with them and work through them. And the crying alone is not about not showing vulnerability, but it's about showing consistency and not sending out the mixed messages. So yeah, I think we had a few good cries. But ultimately it was about creating a consistency and a safety for people around your comfort with your decisions. So I think that's how I'd summarize Consanity. I've got to wrap up. Yeah, so in the end, I think many times the most rewarding things are the toughest things to do. And it's easy to complain. It's easy to walk into situations and define utopia. I think we're all good at that. Ah, if only you could, this would be better. Yeah. What's hard is to then step into that space and take responsibility for the outcomes you want and be willing to make the mistakes in pursuit of those outcomes and be willing to take the hits. But I think ultimately it's rewarding. It's rewarding in realizing that you actually stand for what you say. You're not just a, jabbermouth. You stand for what you say, and you're willing to learn in pursuit of your beliefs. And then ultimately, that world you want to live in can only exist if you're part of making it happen. And so I learned from Adam this week about the normalization of deviance, where you get so used to things being wrong, you rather normalize them, and it's like, that hoodie is funny, and we're normalizing. We're making ourselves comfortable with things that inside we know shouldn't be okay. But that's because it's really hard to build the world you want to be a part of. It's hard to make the teams you want to be a part of. It's hard to be a black woman in an environment that's hostile to you. It's even harder to then be a black woman pushing against that hostility. And then it's super hard to push against that hostility and keep your humanity. And so I think it's hard, but it's worth it. Because now I work in pretty diverse teams of people, and there's mutual respect, and we know how to disagree in a healthy way and be honest, truthful people, I think. And I think through this journey, I built some really mature, good relationships, and there are now people around me who I can trust and help me feel, like a good human, which I think is what we all aspire to. So thank you for listening to our story, and